It's time for Show Off Sunday, where everyone has a chance to show off their own car, and here's this week's winner.
'72 Plymouth Road Runner. You may not see much of my face in this video. It is so shaky in this car, but for good reason. I mean, growing up as a millennial, a young person who was trying to find their own way in the car culture, you heard about pretty much two muscle cars, the Camaro and the Mustang. I also had really not heard much about Plymouth as a company. Turns out Plymouth is a section of Chrysler, their target market being the low-priced models. And they started out pretty successfully and really hit their stride during the Great Depression when, you know, people didn't have money and wanted cheap cars. And they sold well, continuing all through the 50s. I'll point to the Belvedere as an example there. But when the people at Plymouth saw that the muscle cars and the pony cars were starting to deviate from the original core values of affordability and V8s and simplicity, Plymouth decided that they were going to try their hand at bringing the muscle car back to its roots with the first Plymouth Road Runner. And I can't talk about a Plymouth Road Runner without talking about the name and the graphics and the bird itself. Back in the mid-1960s, Plymouth had to pay Warner Brothers around $50,000 for the rights to call their car the Road Runner. Hearing that Plymouth was able to license Road Runner for $50,000 sounds like a steal, but you gotta remember $50,000 was quite a chunk of change in that day. For comparison's sake, you got the Hemi in this car as an option for only $700.
The Road Runner was introduced with 3 engine choices, and in proper muscle car spirit, they're all V8s. There's the 383 cubic inch, the 440, and the 426 Hemi V8. Now, if you're more familiar with liters like I am than you are cubic inches, those are going to translate into 6.3, 7.2, and 7.0 liters, respectively. Even with the smallest engine, the 383, you were still getting a 335 horsepower monster, and that 426 Hemi got you 425 horsepower.
Now, Plymouth expected moderate success out of the car, but the actual sales numbers blew their minds. They expected to move 20,000 of these in the first year. They ended up over doubling that at roughly 45,000. After 1970, you see a big redesign in the front and rear fascia. Chrysler was moving all their products to a more standardized, what they called fuselage aesthetic, with a more narrowed, closed-off front, which is supposed to help with aerodynamics. Tachometer gauges, a few other modern gauges along with the original set. Classic period, pleather, and plasticky dash. I mean, you gotta remember this is Plymouth. The goal here was to make an affordable muscle car. The Camaro and the Mustang had all the glitz, the chrome, the show-off bits, but this is the working man's muscle car. And I think they were successful in their goal of trying to return to the roots of the muscle car. This is no frills, this is loud and shouty, but it's not expensive and it's not unreasonable. We have the 3-speed automatic, which I think is perfect. I know there's a push to save the manuals, and believe me, I'm on board with that sentiment, but this is a car you just want to stick your one hand on the wheel and cruise and not really have to think too much, and it's perfect. I wouldn't have it any other way. I describe the sound less as an orchestra and more of a firing range. It's loud, it's deep, it's rumbly, but only when you want it to be, only when you put your foot to the floor. If you're cruising, I mean, don't get me wrong, you know you're still rocking a big block, but not unreasonable, not obnoxious. When you start to venture into anything more than straight line speed, The steering's weird, the brakes suck. You gotta really plan ahead where you're gonna stop. It seems like you can slow down pretty fine once you get about halfway through the brake travel, but to come to a stop, you really gotta stand on it. But this car's not about stopping, it's about going. And man, does it go. Let's highlight some exterior features. First of all, no, this is not an original color. On the hood, you've got these 440 decals on these divots. It reminds me a little bit of the modern Challenger hood, but I prefer this style. And a 1971 era stripe on the rear. I love the personality of this car. I mean, right now I'm cruising 35 down some back roads and it's perfectly civilized. I'm comfortable, the seat is a hell of a lot more comfy than my Miata seat. This is all quite manageable. It's got power steering, so I don't have to muscle it around too much. The other side of that coin is, man, if you want to put your foot down. I will say, under hard acceleration, it gets a little bit floaty. This is an old car, and you got to expect a little bit of that. Why are we not still talking about this car? I mean, it's good looking. It's got all the right recipe elements, and it's even got the most unique and entertaining marketing campaign I've ever heard of. I think the answer to that is twofold. One, they just weren't produced in the same numbers as the Camaro or the Mustang, and they're expensive to repair. And that, combined with Plymouth no longer being around, means resources are thin or difficult to access. And two, I think the Road Runner's shtick was just a little too silly for some traditional muscle car people. Having a big yellow and blue bird on your car might have deterred some people. But that's a blessing and a curse because everybody owns a Camaro. Everybody owns a Mustang. But these are hidden gems. If you own these, you own something special.
Well, that was this week's video, and remember, to have your car video highlighted here on my channel, check this out! So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell!